Spider-Man, the bombastic BagMan, has developed a life of his own. From a single appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 258, he's gone on to video games, Funko Pops, and even a Marvel Universe variant figure. But now, he has made the leap to the big time with his very own Marvel Legends action figure. We're going to review the figure, but that's not all. We have an in-depth interview with legendary Spider-Man artist Ron Frenz, the co-creator of BagMan, detailing how this unique version of the wall crawler came to be. And you'll only find it here at Carbon Scoring. Ron Frenz's comics career has spanned over 4 decades, and he's had lengthy runs on both Thor and Superman, co-creating such characters as the New Warriors, Thunderstrike, and even designing Superman's blue suit. But he is perhaps best known for teaming up with writer Tom DeFalco on their co-creation Mayday Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Girl, and their monumental run on Amazing Spider-Man in the 1980s. Ron was kind enough to take time with us to discuss the first and only appearance of the bombastic BagMan.
So I'm here with comics legend Ron Frenz, who has been so grateful to take a little time with us. Thank you again, Ron.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Trey. My pleasure, really.
I have with me my original copy of Amazing Spider-Man issue 258 from all the way back in 1984. And I truly believe that this is one of the finest single issues of Amazing Spider-Man that's ever written. Well, in a day of comic decompression, where it takes 6 issues to tell any kind of story, in this single issue, you revealed that Mary Jane Watson had known that Peter Parker was Spider-Man since they were in high school. You had guest appearances by the Black Cat and the Fantastic Four. You were able to progress the plot saga of the Puma as well as the Hobgoblin. And of course, you had the big reveal that the Black Suit was actually a living symbiote and was trying to bond with Peter Parker. Now, yes. You had been on the title for about 6 months at that time, working with Tom DeFalco as the writer. What was y'all's creative style together? Did he give you full scripts, or was it more Marvel method?
Oh, it was absolutely Marvel method. And before he even put anything on the page, we would discuss it on the phone. And we shared our points of view on Peter Parker, and Tom was a very, very generous and giving writer. He realized that you can't write 12 issues of anything a year without taking ideas from wherever they may come, even if it's from a fairly new penciler. But and back then we had newsstand sales. It was a very different world than it is today, comics wise. So you were trying to fill the issue with as much as possible. You were trying to give them their money's worth. I don't even know how much did that issue cost you?
60 cents off of the news.
60 cents. We were desperately trying to give you your $4 worth for 60 cents, that kind of thing. It was one of those month after month after month after month. We weren't doing arcs back then to be collected. We were trying to give you a real ride for 60 cents every month to get you to come back the next month, and that was it. And the covers meant something because you were usually on a spinner rack in a high traffic area in like a drugstore or a newsstand, and you wanted to jump off the rack and attract readership. And so it was a very, very different thing than what it's become. Kind of apples and oranges in a lot of different ways. But yeah, Tom DeFalco was always big on giving the reader their money's worth and making sure that there was plenty of balls in the air, so it would keep you engaged and keep you coming back month after month.
You talked about the storytelling. As I went back through the issue, I noticed that it was predominantly set up in the classic 9-panel layout that Steve Ditko often used for all of his issues, but you did vary the pacing of the panels to kind of keep the story moving along. There was one panel in particular, this kind of wide shot where you have Peter Parker looking down with the floating heads around him, that really struck me as a very Steve Ditko type of image. Was that a purposeful homage to the master?
Yeah, everything I do is an homage to the masters. I'm really not trying to reinvent the wheel. I don't believe it needs to be reinvented. So I am very much a student of those who have come before and trying to kind of maintain a lot of what they brought as tools, storytelling tools to the industry. So yeah, the brooding shot is something that Ditko introduced with Spider-Man, and Romita very much kept it alive. So it's something that, you know, every month you want to check in with all the various and sundry tragedies and or conflicts that Peter's got going on in his life right there. And that was one of those panels. And they helped us keep track of things too, you know. And it was a great way. If a character wasn't featured in the issue, it was a great way to check in and say, we haven't forgotten. That's still percolating over here, you know, that kind of thing.
Certainly brings me to my next question, which is the next part of the story was the nightmare sequence. You have Peter being taken out for a joyride by the symbiote costume. Right. And in the meantime, he has this nightmare where he's being pulled apart by the black suit and the red suit. And in that, you depicted Peter the way that he looked when he was in high school in the very earliest of the Ditko issues. Do you remember if that came out of conversations you had with DeFalco, or if that was?
I don't know if I asked permission for that, because it just seemed very natural to me. And the reason I say that is we all have an ego vision of ourselves. We all have an id vision of ourselves. I'm not sure Pete does. I think Peter is always going to see, no matter what his success is, he's always going to see himself as that kid that he was before the spider bit him. And that's how I thought he would see himself, especially in a dream where he was feeling vulnerable. I felt he would see himself as he was in Amazing Fantasy 15, before, you know, as we were meeting him. And the one thing I do remember is that Tom and I thought it was very natural and not something that needed to be worried about. But our editor, doing his job, added a little line when Pete wakes up from the dream that says, "And I looked like I did in high school." Because at that point, you know, it had been 20 years since he looked like that. And Tom and I, both being fans, we were presuming too much. So again, it was Danny's job to kind of rein us in and say, we could probably use a line in there for the new readers to let them know why Pete suddenly has spectacles and a flat top haircut, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, I guess it comes back to Stan Lee's old saying that every comic is somebody's first. And so you've got to make sure that they understand the story.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said.
Well, let's talk about the bombastic BagMan. You know, this has taken.
That's why I got out of bed this morning, Trey. I got out of bed this morning to talk about BagMan.
Oh, I am so excited that we're getting an action figure of the bombastic BagMan. Now, you have had some of your co-creations made into action figures before, like Puma and Silver Sable. But did you ever dream that a version of Spider-Man that came from your hand would actually exist in the world?
No, I spoke with Tom DeFalco briefly this morning, and we were laughing about it because you know, you never know what's gonna catch and what didn't. And frankly, it was years later, I believe, probably because of video games.
Yes,
that this kind of came back around, and even christened him the bombastic BagMan. As Tom and I were doing this scene where Spider-Man loses the symbiote, and Reed Richards and Johnny Storm capture it and put it in a little glass tube, Pete is left in his tidy whities, and he hadn't even been wearing his web shooters at that point because he didn't need them because the suit produced its own webbing. So he is Peter Parker in his tidy whities, and at that point, he still had a secret identity between himself and the Fantastic Four. I think they're now on the list of people who know.
They're on the short list.
But back then, they weren't. And so he was still concerned with keeping his identity a secret. So the Fantastic Four being helpful, Johnny Storm being helpful, they gave him an old Fantastic Four costume that tended to fit a little more baggy, even though they were made from unstable molecules. They didn't give him the boots, of course, because without the boots being a specific thinness, his wall crawling ability wouldn't work. So he just had stirrups and bare feet. Um, he did wear the gloves, and because he was concerned about his identity, Johnny grabbed the first thing he could find, which was a brown paper bag, which were more in use back then than they are today. And they cut 2 eye holes in it and put that on there. And then Johnny added a little flair of his own and managed to slap a "kick me" sign on the back as Pete was leaving the room. And there you had the all new Spider-Man, which was, at the time we were kind of calling him the unknown superhero, based on the Unknown comic.
There's so much in those scenes because, one, you do a great job of rendering the fact that the Fantastic Four were in the new John Byrne costumes, which were much more form-fitting, whereas the old Kirby costume that they pulled out, clearly had the wrinkles. It was much baggier. Johnny's expression through the whole thing, you can just see the joy on his face. I mean, he just knows that he's pulled one over and just can barely hold it in. And there's even a scene where Reed kind of gets what's going on and lets Johnny keep his joke going.
I think, the relationship between, for those who don't know, the relationship between Spider-Man and Human Torch has always been that of high schoolers going at each other in various and different ways and pulling practical jokes on each other, things like that. So they had a very dog and cat relationship from the very beginning. Both being younger when they started their careers, both being teenagers when they started their careers. And I think, Reed's gonna, he's gonna be on the home team. He's gonna appreciate the fact that, Spider-Man can be a little standoffish at times, and all of us can afford to have our balloon popped every once in a while. And it was relatively harmless. All he had to do was get dropped off in Manhattan and make it to wherever his apartment was without incident. Unfortunately, Peter Parker being Peter Parker, and always being victimized by something called the old Parker luck, that was not to be.
Not only that, but you managed in a panel, one of the great things about Marvel Comics, particularly at the time, was continuity. And it starts snowing on Peter. Over in the Thor books, the casket of the Ancient Winters had been opened up. So one more little bit of Parker luck as you're, trying to get home barefooted without your web shooters in the snow. So it never ends.
I give Tom a lot of credit for that one, because yes, we were all told that month that it had to snow. Because we did want to keep that continuity. I believe the cask of Ancient Winters was opened at Central Park, so everybody who was based in New York, we had to snow. We didn't know if it had to be a roaring snow or a falling snow, depending on where you were on the island, but we were told it had to snow. And for everything that poor Pete was going through in that issue, we just decided that would be the button.
Yeah,
it's the middle of summer, and he has to get home barefoot. And it starts to snow, and he didn't even want to hear about it. I don't even want to know. I just want this day to be over. But yeah, the twist being that, of course, he had to stop a bank robbery with a hostage involved, and the media was there to witness it. So people were asking questions, photos were taken. People thought it was some kind of superhero initiation, or maybe he was actually trying out for the Fantastic Four. And he just couldn't. He just couldn't get home. Something had to happen that would imprint this whole incident on Pete's psyche for the rest of his life, which is always what happened to that poor guy. But it also apparently kept it visible enough that when they were looking for extra skins in a video game, somebody remembered this as an issue that they had seen back in the day, and suddenly he was rechristened the Bombastic BagMan, and now there's actually Brett Breeding just got me the Pop figure.
Oh yes, I have that one as well. Yes,
they did a Pop figure of it, and I've seen the one advertised that you're talking about, the new action figure that comes with the Kick Me sign.
It does,
which I thought was a wonderful little addition, but. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those crazy things that, this wasn't something that we were figuring was going to stick, But when you're throwing things against the wall every month, trying to fill content, sometimes you have no control over what sticks and what doesn't.
Well, and then sometimes magic happens. And that's really what happened with the Kick Me sign, because again, as I was looking back through the issue, the sign is clearly taped to his back the whole time that he is running around in the FF costume, but you don't actually see it. And you don't actually see the words "kick me" until he's surrounded by the reporters. So it's like a little bonus reveal that came in there. I know you've seen the action figure product, the card back that they used. It looks like they actually used a commission of the BagMan that was up on your website.
Yes.
Did Hasbro or Marvel, have they given any kind of acknowledgement to you about using that artwork, or is that?
No, in fact, I did a Facebook post about it because I saw it and I went, oh, that's cool. They're doing an action figure. And then I went, wait a minute. And I thought that looked familiar. So I've done a handful of BagMan commissions over the last several years. And I went and looked in my file and I went, oh, that's they pulled it off the internet. I mean, that's the thing. I don't own the copyright. I don't own the IP. So oftentimes it's happened before that I did like a practice shot of Thor, and years later, a gentleman named Bob McLeod, who's a comics illustrator and inker, did a finished version of it and a colored version of it. And at one point I noticed somebody had done a patch of it, a fabric patch of it. And it's because if they have the license, they just go out on the internet and look for an appropriate image. And our stuff's out there and Marvel owns the copyright. So it's fair game, really. I'm sure whoever did the actual illustration for the box art doesn't know who I am and doesn't care who I am. They were given the assignment, probably even handed the figure off the internet by their art director and said, just do something like this, that kind of thing. So it is what it is. In a way, it's kind of flattering because knowingly or unknowingly, they actually used an illustration based on one of his daddies. So that's cool,
Well, I can certainly say that I care. And I know that for my viewers, we all very much care. And we're so thankful for the contributions that you made to the Spider-Man mythos. As you know, Spider-Man is really defined by his ability to overcome just about any obstacle. And maybe the three greatest examples of that would be the Master Planner saga, Ditko, where he lifts the machinery off of him. The battle with Juggernaut right before your run came on. And then the battle against Firelord is one of those where Spider-Man is faced with absolutely unstoppable odds. He has no chance, but his will to survive and become victorious always plays out. And they're coming out with a new Firelord figure here sometime in the next year. Maybe we can get back together and go over that sometime.
That would be my pleasure. I would think that the Firelord two-parter is a little more divisive than BagMan, but every time I bring it up on my Facebook page, there are equal members of the greatest Spidey fight of all time, and this is ridiculous. There's no way Spider-Man could beat a Herald of Galactus, but in almost every case, this may not be fair, so I'm going to say in almost every case, I get the impression that the people that really hated it haven't read
it. That's the way that life is these days. I mean, certainly they read the headline,
right?
And didn't read the story.
Well, one of the reasons being at that point, Spider-Man was wearing a cloth version of the black costume that was given him by the Black Cat, and a lot of people say, "Well, I guess it could happen if he was, considering that he's wearing the symbiote." And I have to be the one to say, no, he's not wearing the symbiote.
Yeah,
so they can go, oh, well, then it's ridiculous. It could never happen. And it's like,
that's a pretty big tell that they have not read the story.
but for people to say that could never happen is always curious to me, because nobody is more aware than I am that we made it all up. So, no, it couldn't really happen, because if it did really happen, Manhattan would be in trouble, because that would mean there's a guy with a stick that's on fire that came from space fighting a guy that was bit by a radioactive spider and crawls on walls.
He just wanted the pizza, though. I mean, if they'd have just given him the pizza, everything would have turned out fine.
He just wanted a slice. That's the only reason he even stopped. across the galaxy. That is what New York is known for, is the Brooklyn slice. Come on now. Who could blame the guy?
Ron Friends, thank you so much for spending time with us.
It's been my pleasure, Trey. Thank you very much. I had fun.
Wow. I mean, how freaking fantastic was that? You know, they say all the time you should never meet your heroes. Those people have never met Ron Friends because he was as kind and as generous with his time and talking to us about this issue as anybody I've ever met. He's just absolutely fantastic. I hate it because I had to edit the video down. It's actually 40 minutes long. If you're interested in watching the entire video, and there is some great stuff in there, including some interactions with the one and only, the legendary Mr. Steve Ditko, the full interview is posted on the membership page. So if you're a channel member, you can check out the entire 40-minute video of my time with Ron Friends. But what just an incredible guy, an incredible artist, one of the greats in Spider-Man history. Now, here we have him. Here is the bombastic BagMan himself. And let's take a look at the package, because I love these retro packages. I love that it's got the retro Amazing Spider-Man logo from the time. Here is the artwork that we talked about. It was basically a copy of a commission that Mr. Friends had done. And of course, you've got the figure in the package. He has his extra hands and the Kick Me sign fully available that goes on the back. There's a little bit of a bio on the back, which talks about a desperate Peter Parker donning a spare FF uniform. Really cool, but for me, that is definitely a display piece, and I love that retro packaging. Now, I've certainly heard people kind of goof on this figure and talk about how it's a throwaway and what a waste. Well, I think it comes back exactly to what Ron said. You haven't read the issue. If you've read the issue, you know that BagMan was a pretty vital part of an incredibly important Spider-Man storyline. I mean, this is right in the heart of the Venom symbiote time. And, you know, any great storyteller is going to try to mix in a little bit of levity and a little bit of fun in a serious episode. And that's what they did here. Oh, look how good that Kick Me sign is, even with the piece of tape on the back. And it fits right into the peg. So that means you can kind of move it around. So if you want to get him in some action poses, you can do that. Now, of course, this figure is just a reuse of the Reed Richards body. Uh-oh, got to make sure the tape sticks. Don't want that Kick Me sign to come off the back. But I think it really works well. It's still a very thin Spider-Man. It looks very much like the type of frame that Ron Friends drew Spider-Man at the time. Plus, when you get into the details of this costume, you can see that they sculpted in a lot of the folds so that it looks more like a cloth costume and less like, you know, just a giant spandex suit. So you get a little bit of that Kirby feel. Here you can see kind of the folds coming around the shoulder where it sort of bunches up at his armpit on both sides. You can see a little bit of that here at the back and again down near the hips. I thought it was really interesting how well thought out this whole thing was. You heard Ron Friends say he didn't wear the boots because the boots wouldn't be the correct thickness to allow him to use his spider clinging powers and wall crawl. And so he had to be barefoot. And so he just has the stirrups on. But instead of just cheaping out and just putting bare feet on this figure, Hasbro actually painted in the stirrups so that it completes the look just like the original drawings had. Now, really the only new part per se of this whole figure is the head sculpt. And man, is it good. If you look closely, you can see they use the face printing technology on the eyes inside the bag. And when you look underneath, there is a head underneath there, even down to the little rivets, the little triangular nubs at the end of the bag. And look at how much texture this bag has. Look, you can see where you would fold it up. You can see where it's been folded up. This backside is much more crinkly and wrinkled than the front side. The front side has the indentation, or the little part where Peter's nose would be and where he's like breathing and it's poking out in front of his mouth. Plus, this is a great figure as far as being able to, I just cannot keep, I've been playing with this thing. Ever since I got it, I have not stopped playing with it. It has been sitting right by my chair and I've just been fiddling with it, you know, in the evenings because As you guys can tell, I just love it so much. But look at what you can do with this. I mean, you can get it into all the Spidey poses that you're looking for. I'm really glad they included these black wall crawling type hands because I think those look really cool, particularly because you notice this Spider-Man did not come with thwippy hands because why would he? He didn't have his web shooters in this issue. The black suit, the symbiote suit, actually produced its own webs. So Spidey wasn't using his web shooters. So when he lost the suit, he didn't have web shooters. So he just had to basically walk and jump and leap on his way home in the snow. And how cool was it that when I brought up the fact that the Casket of Ancient Winters had been opened up in the Hulk books, that Ron Frenz knew exactly what I was talking about. I mean, this story was done almost 30 years ago, and he remembered every single aspect of it just like it was yesterday. I mean, it's just such a gift. So, you know, I'm just can't get over how thankful I am for him being able to take time with us. This is a really spectacular figure, and if you guys would like to see more creator interviews, if there are people or figures or comic luminaries that you'd like for me to try to reach out to and see if they would be interested in doing an interview, let me know in the comments. This was truly one of the most fun videos that I've ever done and something that I really am so thankful to have gotten the opportunity to present to you. But if you didn't know before, now you know the history and the importance of the bombastic BagMan. Don't run off just yet. We're still bringing you the best in comics history and action figures here every week, like this video or this playlist. Hey, just subscribe already to Carbon Scoring.